What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a review of Past Lives, the new drama film from Celine Song, her directorial debut from A24, starring Greta Lee. This is the best movie of 2023 thus far. I absolutely loved this movie. It incredibly moved me in ways I didn't expect, and it's definitely my favorite movie of the year thus far. I'm going to get into all of those reasons why, including spoilers, but I'll just start at the beginning here. But yeah, amazing film, a must-watch movie. This came out in a limited release 2 weeks ago in New York, LA. Got a brief expansion last week, and I was able to see it. It'll go nationwide in a few weeks, June 23rd. So it's coming. Everyone will be able to see this soon, but it's really great. It's premiered back at Sundance, but now it's, got the A24 push behind it. I think this is the first real official, Oscar contender movie that's come out, especially on the original screenplay front, the best actress front for Greta Lee. Other awards bodies, best first feature film from Celine Song, the Korean-Canadian playwright. This is her first film. So impressive. I think so incredibly affecting and moving. It's a movie that doesn't steep itself in cliche or predictability at all, and absolutely nails its ending. But I think it's a really captivating movie for something that's as dramatic as it is. Now, this is a movie about Nora, a young woman in Seoul who is emigrating, or her family is immigrating from Seoul to Canada and then to the United States. And in the process, Nora is going to leave behind her, childhood friend, Haesung. They're both about 12 years old at the time. They seem to have a real kinetic kinship, platonic, but perhaps suggesting of future romance down the line once they both mature. One of those really close connections that sometimes you do find in young people. And this movie, having that premise of right there, I think is a really strong hook, because then the structure of this film really jumps in and grabs you, because we very quickly jump ahead 12 years. Now we're with young Nora in her 20s, played by Greta Lee now, moving to New York City to pursue a writing career, as a playwright. And this is a bit autobiographical from Celine's Song as well, so you can kind of feel the connection there. Real life playwright makes a movie about a playwright. There we go. But Nora, of course, is her given English name, accepted English name that she picks. Nora, really wants to make something of her life in New York after her family has, immigrated twice to, find a new life, leaving Korea behind. And kind of by chance, Nora looks up Haesung, kind of like the memory of Haesung when they were kids kind of pops back up in her mind when talking to her mother. And she looks him up on Facebook. Funny enough, this is set in 2012, so it's like Facebook 1.0, the very original, basic, streamlined version of Facebook. Looks him up, connects with Haesung, and actually does a Skype call. Again, shout out 2012. And they connect for the first time in 12 years. Haesung is still in Korea, and Nora has, pursued a completely new life without him. And they start, catching up and I guess reacquainting themselves with each other over Skype, with that massive time difference and whatnot. And then, Nora makes a very clear decision, very important part of the movie, where Nora decides to kind of cut off their Skyping, their Skype calls, their regular correspondence, getting, to know each other again, because Nora really wants to make something of her life in New York first. She doesn't feel like she's accomplished anything yet, and she wants to do that first, and says that they can reconnect down the line. And it's really, I think, a really, tough moment, for Haesung, because we spend some moments with Haesung, with his buddies, back in Seoul, spending time at the dinner table, drinking soju and stuff, kind of talking. You can tell that Hae Sung had this feeling of longing, this feeling of missed opportunity, missed chance with Nora, even though that was a connection from when they were very young. And it's almost a bit, naive to think that way, but his friends kind of encourage him in a certain sense, and he's incredibly disappointed when Nora wants to cut it off. And again, this is again just Skype calling, right? And I think at this point, this movie, that structure, I think, is really, really engaging. Because we quickly transitioned to Nora going on a artist retreat, writer's retreat over in Montauk, in Long Island, and there she meets a fellow artist, a writer, like a novelist, Arthur, played by John Magaro, and they hit it off at the retreat, and then we have another 12-minute flash forward, moving into the third act of the film, basically, and next thing we know, they're now 36 or so, in their mid 30s, 12 years in the future, and they got married. Arthur and Nora are married, and it's like, oh my god, it's like you think this is a movie that's setting up this will they or won't they, um, you know, lost in translation type storytelling, and it still might get there, but to throw a big wrench in the Nora getting married, to a white American as well, really kind of committing to that life, and at this stage, Act Three, I think, really kicks into high gear, and everything really kind of comes through with a key decision. But there's this, I think, really strong thematic thing presented at that Raiders retreat when Arthur and Nora connect, and that is Nora bringing up the Korean concept of inyon, which is broadly, forgive me, but broadly just a concept of past lives. Again, the name of this movie, past lives, that you perhaps meet someone in a previous life, and then your interaction, your relationship with them can progress or change or grow in a future life. Basically, is that concept. And Nora kind of brings it up as a joke to Arthur, because she says, "Oh, it's just how Koreans use inyon as a way to seduce people," and she does that, and she gives this kind of subtle mannerism, as telling Arthur it's okay for you to kiss me now, And then we quickly flash forward 12 years, they got married, and inyon will come back up at the end of the movie, but I think that was a really funny moment. There is some brief moments of subtle humor, often with Arthur involved, that I think go a really long way. But Greta Lee, to this point, is giving, I think, a really incredible performance, because it's often subtle, it's often mannerisms with the face, whether it's her side profile or something like gesturing. I was quite impressed, especially because my main interaction with Greta Lee, who's been very active as an actress, mainly as a comedy actress. Think of her in Russian Doll in a supporting role, for example. She's a funny person. John Magaro, my gosh, he is really quickly rising up the rankings of some of the best actors we have right now. Think of his roles in First Cow and Showing Up earlier this year. Definitely an A24 favorite at this point. And he gives a really great performance as Arthur. And, I think Act 3 is really where the action, if you want to call it that, happens in past lives, because we jump ahead 10, 12 years again. Arthur and Nora are happily married. They're very successful in their artistic careers as well, living in the East Village in New York. And Nora connects with Hae Sung again after 12 years of them not talking at all once they stopped Skyping. And Hae Sung actually decides to come to New York from Seoul, visit New York. And it's not positioned or brought up to Nora as he's visiting New York to meet her. But once they do reconnect in person for the first time in 24 years, and I believe it was Central Park, Nora quickly realizes that he actually did come to see her again. And from this point out, I think the chemistry between Greta Lee as Nora and Teo Yu as Hae Sung is absolutely palpable. And at this point, watching the movie, you are absolutely wrapped and on the edge of your seat, because you don't know what's going to happen. Because again, this movie has not steered into cliche at any point, so you haven't really had a feel for what's going to happen. And I think it's also an amazing movie because this ending is so, I think, rich to discuss with other people who have seen the movie because, I mean, something wild really happens. Nora, after spending like a whole day with Hae-sung, they go see the Statue of Liberty. Um, they, spend time together, talking to each other and stuff. Nora brings Hae-sung to her home and introduces him to Arthur. And Arthur speaks just a faint amount of Korean. Hae-sung speaks just a faint amount of English. They don't really have the ability to communicate all that well. And from there, they go out to a bar together, and it's one of these, I think, just an amazing sequence where you have Nora in between them sitting at a bar, this kind of wide shot, and they're talking, and Nora's kind of like doing some translation between the two. But then, Hae-sung and Nora have this conversation together at the bar, and they kind of isolate Arthur, and Arthur can't really keep up with the conversation. They're not bringing him in as much anymore, and you can tell it's bothering Arthur. And even before this, you could tell that Arthur was, kind of really struggling with like the idea of, the past spurned potential lover of his wife's deep past has come back into her life, and does he feel threatened? But he doesn't want to be overly controlling of his wife. I think it's a really uh, crazy situation to put yourself in, and John Magaro just really, I think, is able to demonstrate how like you would be going through it in your mind in that situation, and you can tell that he's getting a bit just upset. Not that he's lashing out or anything, but you can tell he's having a hard time basically sitting next to this like incredible chemistry, you know. And I think before this, before um, Hae-sung is brought to the bar like the night before, when Nora explains like the day they had together when she was catching up with him, Arthur and Nora have this, I think, really astute conversation like in bed, just talking to each other, where they kind of speak about how they came together. And I think a big part of that was they both were going to be in New York City, both had artistic ambitions. Them getting married faster than planned helped Nora with getting her green card. Some conveniences with how they got together, right? And it's in spite of all that, of course, they're happy. They do love each other. They have a great life together, and yet you can tell that like as it's being positioned when they're talking to each other at the bar, like Nora has this feeling of like, what could have been. Not even so much the one that got away, but just like, is this the life I was supposed to have lived? And that's what's, I think, so amazing about past lives, is that it's so interesting, I think, and more like a philosophical, um, you know, proposition about like the lives we all live and whether that's what we are like really supposed to do in life. And you can break that down into like missed opportunity and like the one who got away. But I think bringing in that premise of Inyeon, after uh, Nora and Haesung and Arthur leave the bar, um, Haesung calls an Uber from their place to go to the airport, I believe, to leave, or at least go to his hotel and then leave the next day. And Arthur stays on this in the apartment, and Nora walks into the Uber. And then we have this like, I believe it's like 5-6 minute tracking shot, and it's a wide shot, a pan. They walked out of their brownstone, and Nora and Haesung walk from, as our viewer, they walk to our left towards on the sidewalk, almost like walking back into the past. Then they stand there on the curb, just kind of looking into each other's eyes. And at this point, as a viewer, you're on the edge of your seat because you've been so invested in these characters and this journey and these performances and this film kind of subverting expectations at all opportunity. You don't know what's going to happen, and you're incredibly moved. And they they embrace briefly, but really it's just a discussion of I think a really dynamite way to end the movie, where Haesung brings up the premise of past lives, and perhaps this very moment that they are sharing together, this is actually a past life, and that in the future they will perhaps be together, you know. And then they leave, or Haesung leaves, gets in the car and leaves. Nora walks back to our right, back into the present time, back into the future, and Arthur's there on the stoop waiting for her, and then she just kind of like sobs in her in his arms, and the movie ends. And yeah, I think just the whole that idea at the very end of like this perhaps actually being a past life, and that there actually maybe there is a chance that this life they could have had together might still actually happen in the future. Um, I think it's just a really affecting like landing of the plane, if you will, especially after all that tension and palpable energy you had felt at the bar scene beforehand. And yeah, I mean, I was just really moved by it. I thought it was. I think it's a really impressive film, and like I was actually kind of like overcome with emotion after watching the movie. Like as I was walking out of the theater, I actually like kind of like welled up just thinking, not because I was like sad about the characters perhaps, but I don't know. I think it's this like very existential type story, and it just kind of makes you think about things, whether that's in your own life or just in general from a more generic standpoint. So yeah, I mean, I think just talk about like like multiple lives and destiny and fate, all these kind of weighty themes we think about all the time in storytelling. But this is, I think, one of the most sophisticated ways those type of concepts have been presented in a movie. And again, a big part of that is the acting, is this incredibly smart and layered screenplay, is the structure of that screenplay, as I said, just a dynamite ending. I think the Arthur performance from John Magaro again goes a long way with this film as well, because um, Arthur being able to communicate a lot about what that character is feeling in relationship to Nora without having lots of lines all the time in some of those scenes, again speaks to Magaro's acting performance, but just goes a really long way. Obviously, it's a huge breakout performance from Greta Lee, who had a comedy background to this point. Like I said at the beginning, Best Actress worthy without a doubt. That'll be a campaign that A24 pushes for without question. Um, yeah, I mean, I was like really, really blown away. I think it's a special film. It's a film worth discussing with people as well for how you interpret things, and whether that's on a more superficial level, like is Nora actively settling by not running off with Taesung or Haesung versus sticking with Arthur, or just more of the existential stuff that's really stuck with me. I think Teo Yu does a really good job as Haesung, despite not being the real lead character. You know, he's a strong presence to him, and I think he's also able to handle some of the emotional scenes as well. Really liked him. Notably, this movie was announced. Choi Woo-shik was actually supposed to play Haesung. That should be a name familiar to people who've seen Parasite or Train to Busan, but that ended up falling through. But I mean, I think the casting absolutely was dynamite throughout the film, and yeah, I just absolutely loved it. My favorite movie of 2023 thus far. I think for a movie like this, some people might think, oh, does it manipulate you into feeling something? I did not feel manipulated at all. I thought it was incredibly genuine. The way it gets to the emotional beats it lands on, absolutely loved it. And I'm really hopeful that this movie can make some kind of impact at the box office. In this brief expansion this past weekend, it had a strong per theater average for sure, but we've seen that in the past recently. And hopefully this can be a more adult drama film that can find some kind of audience out there. A24 is doing a traditional platform release over a 4-week period. Hopefully that helps the old school way of building buzz, building word of mouth. And the word of mouth, of course, is through the roof with this movie. So I'm hoping the movie makes some kind of box office impact and really gets in front of people, because I think this is a movie that will really stick with people that watch it. It'll definitely stick with me. But let me know, how did you feel about Past Lives? Did you love it as much as I did? And for more movie reviews, of course, Oscar Talk, when this movie comes back around for that later in the year, make sure you subscribe. And I'll see you next time.